All right, welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey here with Chris Ballas and Anthony Broom. Michigan football fall camp is just about ending. Game week is almost here. We are less than 10 days until Michigan kicks off the season against Colorado State. Appreciate everybody watching or listening. Get this video to 500 likes if you're watching on YouTube. We appreciate it. Let's get into some fall camp takeaways as this thing is wrapping up, and it's crazy. We get closer and closer to kickoff. Fellas, let's start with the offense. I mean, this is continues to be, a thing that you feel great about, regardless of what's, going to transpire at quarterback. I think, we all kind of feel at this point the battle will go into the season, and they'll, Cade McNamara probably with the slight edge, and then whoever plays better will play. As Jim Harbaugh has said, it's really that simple. The offensive line should be better in my eyes. You have a lot of talent at the skill positions still. And I feel like that rotation to me is still kind of up in the air, where they're just going to kind of figure it out on the fly too. Ronnie Bell's going to be in there, but the other guys around him, there's enough guys where you could probably rotate a lot.
Yeah, the two guys that we're hearing the most about, guys, are Ronnie Bell and Cornelius Johnson. And you know what? You would expect that of the veterans, right? And There's a segment of the fan base that always wants to anoint the next guy before his time, whether it's Andrell Anthony or Darius Clemens or whoever. But these are the guys, these are the steady guys. And Ronnie Bell is an underrated athlete. He's making plays on the deep ball. People who say he can't don't really understand how football works, and that guys get better, and that this kid is a freak athlete. So, and as the quarterbacks go, you know what? It's amazing to me. There's a segment of the fan base that is so irate that Cade McNamara even has a shot here. And that cracks me up. This is a guy who led a Big Ten championship last year and did one hell of a job for this team and was one of the catalysts in changing the culture. And you're ready to throw this guy into the scrap heap. Well, I have a sneaking suspicion that, if he's not a captain, he's going to be one of the guys that Jim Harbaugh anoints as like an alternate captain or something like that. But It wouldn't surprise me at all if he's a captain. We know that he kind of took this thing by the reins this summer and in the fall, called it his team, and I think his teammates probably feel the same way, even though he is in a quarterback battle with J.J. McCarthy. We have never said that this is Cade's job. We have always said that this is going to be a battle and that J.J. has the license and the ability to take it from him, as Jim Harbaugh would say, right, guys? And so it'll be interesting. But guys that we've talked to in the building that have seen every offensive line since probably 1990 have said that this line is right up there, fellas, with some of the best that he's seen. That includes the elite lines of the early 90s when Doug Skeen, my podcast partner, and the Wolverine.com analyst, was part of that, and the late 1990s line where all those guys played in the NFL with the exception of one, and I think even he did, Dave Brandt, for a while. So this is going to be one heck of an offensive football team.
Yeah, I'm going to go on a bit of a mini rant here, and it's I'm not directing it at any one person, any group of people particularly, although it is stuff I've seen a lot of on our message board. So if you're on the fort, I guess your ears might perk up here. It seems like anytime that any of the three of us insinuate that Cade McNamara is ahead, we take a lot of crap for it. And it's, people will tell us, oh, you got to take offseason intel with a grain of salt, or, not always trusting what mods say or things like that. We're not telling you stuff based on what our opinions are, what we think will happen. This is coming out of camp. I mean, you had Big Ten Network out there last week saying that it's pretty clear that McNamara looks like the guy right now. I think it was Jake Butt on 97 Won the Ticket last week who said that Cade McNamara looks like the guy right now. So I'm ready for this to be done and over with. I'm ready. I know it's going to linger into the non-conference in terms of the quarterback thing. And honestly, it probably should. Something that Greg McElroy of the SEC Network said this week is that the biggest thing Michigan has going for it in this storyline is that you do have a soft non-conference schedule. No disrespect to those teams they'll play, but I'll disrespect them. They're traffic cones, and you're going to have a lot of opportunities to get a lot of reps for both of those guys. So whoever plays the best, I mean, practice is one thing, but I want to see what these guys do when the games start. And the assumption always is that if J.J. McCarthy is as good as we think he is, or as good as he can be, if that winds up happening, he'll start. He'll play most of the games, and he'll take the job. This has never been a program that's played politics with its quarterbacks. This has never been a program that they're going to put the best guys on the field because, Jim Harbaugh said it last year. The position at best is least. So quarterbacks, we'll see what happens. I would expect McNamara to get that first nod next week, as all of us do. Offensively, I can't say anything I hear surprises me right now. We talked to Roman Wilson this week, asking about the wide receivers, what it takes to stay on the field. He said there's a lot of things you have to do, but most of it is consistency and reliability. So when you tell me that Ronnie Bell and Cornelius Johnson have had the best camp, I'm not surprised by that. They've been here the longest. They're savvy. They're veterans. I actually think Ronnie being back is going to do wonders what Cornelius can do, because I think he's probably more of a natural wide receiver too. So offensive line's going to be really good. Running backs, we know how talented they are there. Tight end, I mean, there's talent all over this offense, and there's no excuse for them to not be better than they were last year. It would be pretty disappointing if they were.
Yeah, which is crazy to say. And the fact that, there's really not a ton to take away from the offense because we're still in limbo at quarterback, kind of. And there's so much talent there. And you pretty much feel good about what's going to, transpire early on in the season. Regardless of what happens at quarterback, you go from there. And as Jim Harbaugh and Matt Weiss have said, the offense will kind of evolve a little bit. So there'll be some wrinkles. But again, like Anthony, you said, I'm so sick of talking about it or thinking about what's going to happen. And soon enough, we'll be able to figure out what will happen.
And we do not have a dog in this fight. We do not care if Cade McNamara or J.J. McCarthy starts. We want the best guy. We want the guy that's going to win because it's good for business. Period. End of story. Also, one last remark about those guys who say that Michigan won last year in spite of Cade McNamara. That is still the dumbest argument I have ever heard on a message board, on a Michigan message board.
Well, he's a MAC level quarterback, though. I thought.
Oh God.
Yeah. All right. Next topic.
Let's switch over to the defense, where there's a lot more kind of to talk about. I mean, a lot more question marks coming in. So obviously, they were able to answer some questions. There's still a lot of things, in my opinion, especially the edge rushers. There's a lot of names there, but until we really see it play out in the game, and I know guys are separating themselves in practice, but man, I have a feeling a lot of guys are going to play there, and then you pretty much figure out that rotation as you go. Similar to wide receiver, where they're not established, and I'm not saying they have that type of talent, but in terms of, hey, there's a whole group of guys. Let's see who the top 2, 3, 4 are. Have an idea of that. Another couple things. Interior defensive line, I feel like this is much more deep and talented than we thought, not only at the top with Mozzie Smith and Chris Jenkins, but, with the depth guys, a couple freshmen like Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, who will play this season, which is incredible at the line of scrimmage to be able to say that. Yeah, maybe halfway through the year, we saw that with Chris Hinton when he was a freshman where, about six games in, he started to get more run, but no, they're talking right away for some of these guys. And Kenneth Grant, by the way, wasn't here in the spring. So that's a big feat, for a guy, especially at 356 pounds, when you're trying to figure out, how to play and get all the technique down and things like that. Secondary to me, I felt better about it in the spring than I did going into that. I feel a little bit better about it now as well. In the linebackers, you feel about the same. You kind of want to see what kind of strides those guys have made. It's exciting, just excited to see that. But what takeaways from the defense?
Yeah, a couple things. You've seen guys, right, that Josh Ross was like the highest rated rookie through 2 games in the NFL, according to ProFootballFocus.com. That guy was not a bad football player.
No.
Everybody's saying, oh, we can't wait to get rid of this guy, blah, 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 blah. He's been great in coverage. This guy was a leader. He was a good football player. He made some plays in that Ohio State game that were next level plays, and you thought, okay, this guy's going to have a chance to play on special teams. I'm not saying he's going to tear it up, but he's doing some things right. He was a good football player. So that second linebacker is going to be pretty huge. I think Nikhai Hill-Green can do it. I think Kalel Mullings, I think he's had a lower leg injury, minor, is going to step up there as well. But there are different ways to get to the quarterback, and we've seen this. Last year, everybody talks about how you're going to replace all that and get your sacks. Well, didn't they have the lowest sack total or the second lowest sack total since Jim Harbaugh has been here? Just so happened that they all came from the defensive ends. Mike Elston knows what he's doing as a defensive line coach. He knows there are different ways to get pressure, fellas. And if they collapse the pocket from the inside and force everything outside, I'm fine with that. You know what? I think Mozzie Smith is a bull rusher. You put Smith and Grant next to each other and try to collapse pockets, I think you can go that route. I think they're going to use their linebackers. I think you're going to see Junior Colson used as a pass rusher in several different ways. Plus, I'm writing an article on Iyabi Anoma, the transfer. You know what? He doesn't have to know the whole defense to go rush the passer. And we know this guy has the skills to do that. Writing an article on that for 11 o'clock, so stay tuned on that, although this may not be out by then. So anyway, regardless, watch for that on the site. So
go read it. Yeah.
Exactly. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But and I like the back end, fellas. I think Jamon Green is underrated. I think, if he sees the ball, fellas, when he's always in position, he's got to make plays on the ball. And he's been here long enough, I think, that he can take that next step. I think Steve Klinkscale is an elite secondary coach. So, and everything we've heard about the safeties, Makari Page coming on, Rod Moore is going to be an absolute star back there, and RJ Moten is underrated. So this is going to be a really good defensive football team. As far as the edges go, you know what? Hold your own against the run and, see what happens on passing downs and see who emerges. You got a lot of candidates there. Wouldn't surprise me at all if the true freshman Derek Moore stepped up by the end of the year to become a force there.
Got a lot of guys. And I think that we've talked about this a lot too, where when you really sit down and think about it, did we have more questions about the defense going into last year's fall camp or this year's fall camp? And when you really think long and hard on it, I think we did have the more questions last year because you had the new scheme. You were coming off a terrible season where everything regressed on the defensive side of the ball. So I look at this team now and yeah, I think Jesse Minter probably has a little bit tougher assignment in putting a defense together this year, only because, Mike McDonald, as great as he was, at the end of the day, all he had to do was grab Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo by the collar and see quarterback, hit quarterback. Whereas now I think they're going to have, you'll be able to send pressures from your second and third levels of the defense. I think Junior Colson is probably one of the best chess pieces you have going for you. This is a defense that's going to, I think, probably throw a lot of exotic looks out there to find ways to get to the quarterback. Mike Barrett, we saw him in the sub package stuff last year. What that can do for you at linebacker, so you can move a piece like Colson around. I like the secondary. Jamon Green, a lot of people made a big deal about the fact that he was quote unquote benched last year, but I think that a lot of that had to do with the fact that DJ Turner just came on and he came on strong and he wound up being one of the best cover corners in college football and someone who I think has a chance to be, what a Jordan Lewis, what a David Long was for the Michigan secondary. I think he's that good and he'll have that good a season. So defensively, there are questions about the pass rush. There have always been seasons where Michigan has had some pass rush questions, but you trust the scheme first and foremost. You trust the pedigree of the program, and you got about the best guy you could have probably hired to figure that out, and Mike Elston, based on the guys that were available. So I have very little concern about that. I think they'll probably, you're probably not going to have a 10-sack guy on this team. I think it'll be more of a collective and a group effort. But yeah, this defense, especially with the cushion it has to start the year, I think they're going to hit the ground running and shut a lot of people up about the questions about them.
And this is defensive end, right, Clay? They've been churning them out.
They have been. And that speaks to the pedigree as Anthony's talking about. I mean, like we said, there's plenty of talent there. And I was about to say, when you think about all the guys there, and I'm doing something for this, looking at the snap counts of everybody on this team, not many snaps at a lot of positions. Edge is kind of one of them where you had a couple guys rotate in last year with Taylor Upshaw and Mike Morris. But speaking to Anthony's point, they had two guys where you pretty much can't take them off the field. I know they did with Ojabo on a lot of those running type of downs, but in terms of those big situations where they need to get to the quarterback. So I think things are pretty skewed there a little bit in terms of the lack of stats. I would bet this team has more sacks than they did a year ago. They ranked about 56th, I believe it was, in sacks per game in the country. So that's not a great number. And that speaks to what you were talking about, Chris, with, many other Jim Harbaugh teams had more actual production from there, but they all came from two guys, program record between a duo and 25 sacks. Who leads this team in sacks real quick before we move on, fellas?
That's a great question. You know what? And I've been thinking about this one for a long time. Would it stun you if it were a Junior Colson? It wouldn't stun me. I guess the safe bet is like a Mike Morris. And I think what they're going to do with him, in speaking to some people, is, what you find the matchup where Mike Morris can excel, which lineman he can exploit the most. And even if he doesn't get to the quarterback, that length of his, I remember him batting down 3 or 4 balls at the line of scrimmage last year when he wasn't playing full time. He's going to be playing more. So that is a weapon, fellas. And I think you're going to see him really step into that role. It wouldn't surprise me. It would surprise me a little if it were a Taylor Upshaw. I think at this point in his career, he hasn't really developed that second move yet. But I think Mike Morris had another gear to give, and I think we're going to see that. So I guess he'd be the safe bet, but it could be any number of guys. And you know what? That speaks to two things. Number one, that there's no elite guy that's really come out yet, but there are a lot of good possibilities. Braden McGregor, has had a good camp at some time in some points. Rushing the passer from what we've heard. So it'll be fascinating to watch, and it'll be fascinating to see how these guys rotate, fellas, in the non-conference portion of the schedule.
Yeah, it's the pass rushers and the wide receivers for me in terms of which guy is going to emerge doing what. Those are the two most interesting position groups on this roster right now outside of quarterback. Interesting that you brought up Upshaw. He popped up on the Senior Bowl watch list this week, which I don't know if that's something that Michigan submits or something that the Senior Bowl just kind of asks for a couple, for guys to look at. I'm not ruling out a step forward for him. I'm going to go off the board a little bit. Someone that, again, I think Clay and I have talked about this before. Someone I think I'm a little higher on the most. Jalen Harrell. I think he's a guy that you saw come in and spell David Ojabo during the rundowns. I think he's good in coverage. I think that, based on what we've heard, he's improved as a pass rusher this offseason. I think if he's able to put together a good, if maybe not lead the team in sacks, but if he's able to rack up enough sacks to where you can leave him on the field at all times, I think that's kind of what the archetype of what they want to do with a guy like Derek Moore is, where you can drop into coverage, you can stop the run, you can rush the passer. I'm banking on, I'm not going to put my mortgage on it, but I'll put a hefty sum that I think Jalen Harrell winds up being one of the better players on the defense this year.
I actually have Taylor Upshaw as my pick. He has the most sacks out of anybody on the team, and I know that's not saying a ton. He also has the most snaps played, a little bit more than Mike Morris at the edge spot. But I feel like he is probably the most proven actual pass rusher. And like you said, he'll be more on the edge as opposed to Mike Morris moving around. And he said that when we got to talk to him a couple of weeks ago, Mike Morris. He said, I want to exploit the weak link on the defensive or on the offensive line. So, okay, well, if I'm up to 292 pounds, I can play about anywhere. And if that's a guard, then you put him over him and see if he can go to work.
How about a dark horse one for you? Another guy that was on the Senior Bowl watch list, moved back to edge, someone that has kind of, I think, sneakily had a good camp. How about Julius Welshoff, too? Keep an eye on him.
He's athletic.
He's intriguing. Yeah, and he got pressure when he played a little bit more from the interior in 2020 and then kind of fell out of the rotation last year, now made the position switch.
And if you're looking for a guy on the roster who I think most physically resembles Hutchinson based on the roster that's out, I think he's at 6'7", 265 or 270 right now. So not saying he's Hutch, but again, just someone else that has been on the radar and someone to keep an eye. It's wide open. I mean, this is way more wide open than wide receiver is. So I'm fascinated by this.
And the best news about it is that, like last week, Jim Harbaugh said that it looked the same as last year. The pressure wasn't coming from two guys, but the defensive line got the better of the offensive line markedly. And you know what? As knowing as good as the offensive line is, guys, I think that's a big deal. I think it speaks to the level of talent that's on that side of the ball. I think people are sleeping on that. There are athletes all over the place. Again, it's not just us or the Big Ten Network saying it. We have our sources in the building that are really excited about it and really think that this defense can be really good.
Yeah, speaking of a guy that resembling Aiden Hutchinson, Braden McGregor is another name we haven't mentioned. He's at 261 pounds, 6'6", I believe. That's almost identical to what Hutch was last year. So he's a possibility, too, to come in.
I did mention him, by the way, 3 minutes ago. You just weren't listening.
There you go. That's on me then.
Pay attention, Clay.
He kind of looks like Aiden, though, too, a little bit.
And you know what? Coming off that knee injury, we knew he had potential, So now it's his time, man. You're upperclassmen. You know what? If you don't make the most of your opportunity right now, you're going to get passed up. That's just the way it is.
No doubt. So that's offense, defense. Let's talk quick on some freshmen who we could see, especially early on in the season. Chris, you wrote it the other day that this is a more loaded freshman class than we originally thought. And it's funny because that class kind of flew under the radar a little bit because they closed late and they got these guys where you were excited about them at the end, but they weren't all Will Johnson where you were thinking about, all right, what this guy is going to do, when he comes in. Darius Clemens, guys like that. I mean, he's going to play. I think he's probably going to be in the back end of the wide receiver rotation, even in, bigger games. Will Johnson, obviously. We talked about the two defensive tackles, Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, Derek Moore at defensive end, which is crazy. Those are three guys on the line of scrimmage there. other guys on the back end. I mean, Klink talked about Zeke Berry and what he's done. Keon Sabb, he said it's been really hard for him because he's had to learn both safety spots, but that he's doing well, getting better by the day. CJ Stokes is a guy we didn't talk about with the offense, where he's gotten better and could potentially be that third running back. And then on the offensive line, I don't know if he'll play much, but Andrew Gentry is a guy who Jim Harbaugh said if he had to bet on one freshman to play on the offensive line, it would be him. Now he's 21 years old, so it makes a little bit of sense. But coming off of a 2-year mission where he had to kind of get back in shape and join the team in the summer, that's not easy. So maybe he could jump into the 2 deep at some point. But excited about this freshman class. And with the early season schedule, I think we're going to see a lot of them early. And, of course, they can play those 4 games and keep the red shirt.
A lot of these guys were underrated. Look at Kenneth Grant and where he was rated. You know what? This guy is an absolute freak. Tyler Morris is a guy that not many people are talking about, right? And this is a kid that has made some plays, and people forgot about him because he got hurt. And if I'm not mistaken, what was the injury? Did he have a knee injury?
Yeah, so he tore his ACL last spring, sat out this spring at Michigan, was limited in contact stuff. But
one of our scrimmage observers from a couple weeks ago said this kid was making plays, and you're like, wow. When Jim Harbaugh talks about the freak show, he's not talking about one guy of those 3 freshman receivers. He's talking about all 3 of them. And what a wealth of talent. These last 2 classes, fellas, are going to carry this program for the next 3-4 years. We'll see how it works out with NIL and what they do in terms of recruiting going forward. But that is pretty special, what they have able to do in identifying talent, too. Micah Pollard is a guy that nobody was talking about. And, in fact, there were a couple guys on staff who tried to talk Jim Harbaugh out of taking his former NFL teammate's son, and he goes out there and dominates at a scrimmage and actually leads the talk afterwards. And Harbaugh said, this is the first time that I've had a freshman do this. And he said, this kid, and he actually told that story about how this kid was under the radar and a lot of people didn't think he was good enough. Maybe he's not big enough yet, but this kid makes plays. And those are the kinds of football players that Jim Harbaugh has won with over the years, wherever he's been. He's identified football players, he and his staff. This kid's going to be really good too. So everywhere, every position. Miles Pollard is another one whose name has come up, guys. So I love what they've brought in. They're going to, they're going to have to pick it up on the recruiting trail, but these last 2 classes are going to be pretty special.
Yeah, I was listening, I'll have you know, but during your little segment here, Chris, I did go through and look at the enrollees, and of their top, 11 or so guys in that class, I think 10 of them are honestly going to play a ton this year. Will Johnson, Derek Moore, Keon Sabb, I see them all, playing somewhat significant roles. Darius Clemens will be in the mix. I think Zeke Berry is going to wind up being pretty good. People I know who have seen Tyler Morris play feel like he might be the next Ronnie Bell type of guy. Jimmy Rolder, I think by the end of the year, could be playing at linebacker. Colston Loveland, we've heard a ton about. Obviously, Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham are in the mix there as well. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, this is why a lot of times when people freak out that, oh, look at all these 3 stars or low 4 stars in the recruiting class, I trust their evaluations for the most part. Now, this current class, that's a show for another day. That's for EJ to do. I think a lot of the guys that they've missed out on have been NIL related, where there is a bit to leave desired there. But this 2022 class and going back to the 2021 class, I mean, those are, now we're going back to like 2016, 2018 levels of impact for what I think these guys will do for the program. So it's exciting. I think that, more and more these high school kids are just ready to go out of the box, and they don't need the 2-3 years of seasoning. Some of these guys will, and they'll just kind of work their way up. And there's always a guy ahead of you when you first get on campus, but the freshman class is going to impact winning. And I am willing to bet a freshman makes a play that helps you win a game or 2 this year. I have no doubt in my mind about that.
Yeah, we saw that last year with, Rod Moore doing some things in 2 of the bigger games. Ohio State
Colson against Rutgers.
Junior Colson with the fumble recovery against Rutgers. 6 guys last year burned their red shirts out of that freshman class. What's the over-under on this one? Would you guys take an over 7.5, 6.5?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. A lot of these guys are going to play on special teams too. So there's just too much good talent, good young talent there that's not going to want to stick around, in my opinion. So you get them on the field and you prep them for next year when there's going to be some turnover. So but I love what they brought in. I love the evaluation, and you just love the chemistry and that the culture is back. 2 years ago, I wrote in the football preview, or in last year's football preview, I said one of the top goals for 2021 was to get that culture back, and they seem to have it. And again, guys like Cade McNamara were a huge part of that, the upperclassmen. So, but you see these guys buying in, and you can sense that there are no more turds out there that are playing for theirs or sitting out when they're not really hurt to protect their NFL draft stock. We will not name names. Pretty obvious if you were paying attention, however. So you don't have that now. It's more the team, and I know that's been overused, but that's exactly what's made this program successful for so many years. And now that they've got that edge back, I don't see that letting up.
Yeah, it's funny. A year ago when we were talking about those types of things and what they had to do to turn it around, people said, oh, you can't go back to that. Turns out those were the principles and the things that really led to success last year. So, not to toot our own horn there, but it's obvious. It's not even us. It's just
honk.
Yep. Yeah, you observe what has happened for decades. So, I guess am I frozen?
Yep, you're better.
A little bit. That's what happens when you do it live.
That's right.
Anything else on fall camp?
I didn't realize this was live, or I'd be more nervous.
It's not. It's not. That's just the showbiz term, sir.
Exactly. Yeah. You know what? We haven't even talked about special teams. It might be the best kicking duo in the country, and Jay Harbaugh's special teams have been elite since he's been here. Another reason that we're so bullish on this team. There was a scrimmage in which Jake Moody made like 11 of his kicks and missed one from 50-something yards by a couple inches, or whatever it was, a long one by a couple of inches. So this guy, I love this guy, and I love that family. I will say this forever. You know what? A guy like that, just a team guy, to come back. He didn't have to come back for a fifth year, fellas. He could have gone out and, you know what, been just as successful trying out for an NFL team, but he loves it here. That is what wins championships, fellas. Brad Robbins for a sixth year. I think he's going to have a monster year. I really expect big things for this team. In the magazine, I think I predicted him to lose one game going into Ohio State. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Michigan runs the table or has a really good chance of it and goes into that Ohio State game setting up an epic showdown with the Buckeyes.
That's what I have too. AB, anything else?
No, just one last thing on the culture being fixed. I've said, throughout the first, whatever it was, 6 years of the Jim Harbaugh era, where there was unfulfilled expectations and some disappointing moments, that it would just be amazing to see what would happen if they could stay out of their own way. And last year they found a way to do that, and they stayed poised. I mean, really, it's remarkable the further removed we get from the poise they showed in a game like at Wisconsin, where you're up big and then Wisconsin charges back and then you punch them in the mouth in their own building, in the second half. Like that was a big turning point for me. And I think that a lot of players felt that way last year too. So we'll see what that moment winds up being this year. Again, I think if they just stay out of their own way, they could roll into Columbus at 10-1 or 11-0 and be playing for something again, which you get to that last Saturday in November and you playing for a chance to play for a championship. To me, that's the baseline thing that every season is judged on. So I think they have a shot to do that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, if you put yourself in that position more times than not, I feel like the cards are going to fall your way at some point. We saw it last year where finally, they had to win at some point. It's not going to go on forever, and they were able to win. So, no, I think you're totally right.
Help that they got a fair whistle that game, too. I might just want to add that.
That's true. The guy on
always a dig at the Zebras.
Exactly.
Well, the guy in the back end there, that ref, he didn't make a single call a game, I think. Even though he
threw a pass interference flag after two were already out. I know.
Right. He just had to join in just to make it look like.
Oh, look at me. Yeah. I'm on fire.
Chris and Skeen did it inside the trenches on Bobby Sagers specifically. Yeah. So
can't wait.
Is that the guy's name? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's who it was. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That is going to be our show for this week. We will talk to you guys next week. Live show on Monday night, and then this on Thursday. And it's game week. It is finally here, so can't wait. Drop a like on this video here. Get it to 500. Thanks to Hutch, our producer. Leave a comment as well, and we'll see everyone next time.